So, hey, we're back. It is episode 3. Today, forecasts, improving on your guesses. Example, who will win the Super Bowl? It could be a forecast, right? Or a guess. Or what will happen to the stock market if the Falcons win the Super Bowl? As if somehow the two are related. I think I tell people in one of the classes I taught, the textbook had a problem like that. And it said something like, if the NFC team wins the Super Bowl, the market typically goes up. And if the AFC team wins, the market goes down. And then it went on to have some kind of set of data with it. And the idea was you were supposed to do a regression model and calculate the fit and then figure out if the two were correlated. And the goal of the question, of course, was correlation is not causation. But once in a while, someone would believe it anyway. Okay, so today, we are talking about how stuff gets done, as I like to say. We make stuff out of other stuff, and then we sell it to people who use the stuff, whatever it is. That's sort of a tribute to the fact that there are so many different ways you can do things. Information transition, communication, and we'll go on to talk about forecasting. But first, from the real world of the e-council, people are looking for officers, and they asked me to tell people, if you want to be an e-council officer, check out that website, or there's posters like this around campus. Apparently, you could be pretty much anything. So, if you want to be a director general or something, right? They have plenty of openings. So, check it out. One thing I do in my classes, I tend to bring articles to class and just talk about them briefly and how what we learn in here would have something to do with your real life afterwards. That's always nice, right? Instead of the endless drudgery of calculus and linear algebra. If you have not seen this initialism, you should become familiar with it. The Internet of Things. Example, in the frozen food industry, there's an outfit that has a system that would show up on somebody's iPhone or whatever that is. And notice these temperatures, degrees. This is essentially connected to sensors in a truck that's on various trucks that are on distribution routes. So say, for example, you sold orange juice and you were tracking your trucks out delivering in the supply chain. You could have sensors in the trucks that would tell you the trucks are cold enough, which could be an issue if you sell something like orange juice. So one of the things that will happen in your career, certainly, is the Internet of Things will become more present. Now, when people fantasize about that, they tend to get a little spooky. I like to say. And you'll have someone theorizing that your refrigerator could talk to the store. Like somehow it would know you were out of orange juice and tell the store to send more. And like when you're a college student, that sounds unbelievably odd, but there are people fantasizing stuff like that. When you see people fooling around with hooking their house alarm and lights and things like that onto an internet connection and controlling it from afar, I think we've seen this on campus. A couple of characters have their iPhones shipping them pictures from cameras in the hallways and things like that. It's an interesting problem in the supply chain business. So you'll see that. The other thing you should be paying attention to is most of the companies you will probably go to work for are global. And currently, without getting into the politics of things, the whole trade structure is being revisited. And if you work for a company, say like Nike, who does a lot of business with suppliers overseas, how the supply chain will work will evolve, possibly dramatically, possibly not. And again, generally, I try to keep the world of politics that's out there out of here, since it's too easy to get caught up in something that's not going to help with the equations. The equations work regardless of the policy. You just get different results. Sometimes good, sometimes not good, right? And of course, it's too soon to know exactly what people are thinking about. But if you want some examples of the kinds of things we're talking about in here, we're about to talk about forecasting. And if you're forecasting availability of, say, for example, you get, I don't know, this sweater I have on, I got from a catalog company named Turtleson. They had it made in China. And I would imagine they got a whole trailer load of stuff that came on a ship that got let off at, I don't know, potentially Long Beach, California. Container got stuck on a railroad car. Railroad car went across the country. A crane picked it up, stuck it on a trailer, delivered to Turtleson's warehouse, which oddly enough is the same warehouse as many other companies, which suggests there's another business out there in terms of catalog fulfillment that you may have never heard of, but may run into when you get out of school. And if situations change on how that stuff can be picked up and delivered from China, that could change a whole way of doing things, right? Even if, say, there's a natural event that delays shipping, it can screw up people's supply chains. For example, a typhoon or what have you, hurricane, earthquake, all of those can cause disruptions. A few years ago, Christmas Day was on a weekday, and it happened that there was a unpredicted snowstorm that happened to hit in the area of Kentucky and Tennessee. And you're all sitting out there thinking, who cares, right? Well, it's an interesting problem. The air hubs for FedEx, their air hub is Memphis, Tennessee. UPS is Louisville, Kentucky. And if those two hubs shut down because can't fly, nothing goes out on overnight delivery, right? So a whole bunch of people didn't get their Christmas presents overnight. And that caused no end of excitement. And of course, it's a great story to write about and show on TV. Angry gift givers, you know, it's got a theme to it, as I like to joke that most problems have sort of a repetitive theme to them. Like nobody thought, hey, I could have ordered the present a week in advance and not worried about it, right? Instead, FedEx is evil, UPS is evil, and so forth. But as soon as weather hit that supply chain, a whole bunch of people didn't get their presents. To which you say, yeah, big deal, they got it the next day. But think about it carefully. If you were waiting for something, right? So these things happen. They're real, and it's good to follow things in the news for this class because you see it happening every day out there. Okay, so we're going to talk about making stuff, and we start with forecasts. What do we want to do? Who wants what we do, as I like to say? Famously, the company Zappos, beautiful example of supply chain management. If you've ever ordered anything from Zappos, it seems very normal now, right? Doesn't seem odd at all. But there was a day when that was quite an odd experience. I remember talking about it in class and discussing it with some undergrad class, and they were quite disturbed at the idea you could buy shoes without looking at them or trying them on. And I said, but it's not a problem. They said, that's terrible. I wouldn't do that. And I said, $1.2 billion a year worth of sales says you're wrong. Plus $400 million a year in returns, which was quite a few years ago. And they said, oh, now you're talking money. I said, yes. Essentially, Zappos has to predict what people will buy, get it in the warehouse, and ship it out overnight, right? They have to forecast what will people want. If, I don't know, some high-end celebrity wears something and people see it and want to buy it, it has to be there to be sold or you lose a sale. So from forecasts we make plans, then we make detailed plans, then we do the plan, and as I say, it's cousin. We redo the plan, we redo the plan, we redo the plan. But fundamentally, we have to figure out what do people want. Then we prepare to make it, or order it, have someone make it so we can sell it, and so forth. A lot of people I know like, for example, Under Armour products. Under Armour gets all that stuff made overseas, right? I have it too, right? You look inside, it says made in wherever, by someone. That's fine. But somehow they need to know what to buy. Now, this time of year, you can get really good deals on a lot of consumer-type clothing. Why? It's the end of the season. They want to get rid of it so they can sell new stuff. So, forecast comes from something we're going to sell people in this class. What service will we provide? What will we do? If it's an engineered product, it's got to become a design eventually. And if you're in the capstone class with me and Dr. Park, or you took one, you eventually will hear me say there's as many steps in a design process as you'd like. You can have a 5-step process, a 32-step process. There's as many versions of this thing as there are faculty that write textbooks. Fundamentally, though, you got to know what the product configuration is. If you are one of our viewers who's in the Army or the Air Force, big complex systems, you got to know what goes into the thing. You define the configuration. Because when you look at the configuration of the thing, that tells you what goes into it. If you order the wrong spare parts or the wrong replacement parts, you have a problem. You have to know what goes into the thing. So you get a drawing file, a bill of material, all that sort of stuff, as we'll talk about. And then we figure out how we're going to build it or buy it, whatever it is. Somehow it has to appear, right? So how are we going to build it or buy it? One of the fantasies that floats around the TED Talks and other such things is the idea that everyone will 3D print everything. Not yet, is what I usually say. I buy enough of those machines for Dr. Valles and her crew and pay for plenty of plastic, and I know they have ones that do sintered metal and all those other things, but you know what? Like some parts, you're just easier to make. The old way. Drill holes, etc. Turn it, mill it, grind it, whatever. Bang, crash, boom, right? What does it cost me to make it? How long does it take me to make it? What we're really interested in here is labor content, materials, methods we might need. For example, if you do metalworking, you don't just cut the metal, you may have to anneal the metal, heat treat it in some other form. Same thing here. Who's the vendor? The famous term lead time. How long will it take them to do it? If you buy something, you need to know some things about the people who make it for you. Can they do it? How long will it take? All of this kind of stuff. Now, when I bring it down to this level, it seems almost trivial, right? Usually people say, duh, I know all that. And I say, excellent. How come it's not in your model? Minor detail. You left it out of the simulation you developed. Right? So, let's be trivial. Essentially, we determine what to order, how many to order, hope they come in made correctly. Those of you who are, for example, homeowners who may have done some home improvements might understand the following. If I pay you for the 3 visits now, will you do it right the first time? Not to disparage contractors, but a lot of times come up, we don't have that part in the truck, we'll have to order it, come back again, oops, got the wrong part. That's not good, right? Doesn't get you your oven working or what have you. Parts get made, become the product, we send it to the customers, they're happy, they pay, then they get on Yelp and complain, right? I love reading Yelp reviews of places myself because I'm always thinking like, and you went back? How interesting. It's sort of like what I call the court of Facebook. When the comments on the leading things in the news, people know what job Tony Romo should have next. That kind of thing. On our team, right? Really, you're in partners with Jerry Jones. How interesting. Right? Okay. So in any event, this is roughly how the process works at a very high level. And the reason, again, for the high level is that as we start, we're going to start talking about how do you think about this. And now you have to account for everything. No longer do you get to just say, that will be there. And you say, okay, so, and you say, is this a big deal? Ideally, it's automatic. The organization does its thing, and everything comes together happily. But as this is a family show, there's a big blank, happens, right? I don't want any 4-year-olds watching with their parents or older siblings to hear people change designs, products get made wrong, etc., etc. Parts don't work, they come in, a medium is an extra large, that kind of thing, right? There are rough standards on things like that, or specific standards depending on the product. If you have a configuration-controlled set of CAD files, you know exactly what was supposed to happen, but what may have happened might not be what you designed. Or worse yet, you design something that can't be built. I famously remember when I was working in a plant, calling a lead mechanical engineering design guy and saying, would you mind coming out to the shop floor and showing us how this thing you designed goes together? That sounds sarcastic and cynical, doesn't it? Well, it turns out that the people who did the designs didn't actually have the toolkit you have now with NX or SolidWorks. So they were doing everything visualizing it, right? And it turned out there was no clearance for the assembler's hand in building this thing. So things do happen. They really do. And to some extent, if you read the web, right, and you go take a look at the vendors of enterprise resource planning software, they all have little classes on these topics and how to use their software to conquer the problem. And in the vacuum of theory, it all sounds beautiful. Real life, regrettably, is messy. Things don't happen right, they don't arrive on time, you ordered the wrong thing. All sorts of interesting things happen. And that's what makes going to work in the morning exciting. You know that during the day there will be plenty of things to talk about and discuss at length. So, our goal in talking about all this is, the idea is, how do we better achieve the big picture? If we could, obviously, if the people who wrote this textbook had all their theories implemented correctly, they think the world would work perfectly, right? As the somewhat sarcastic observation went, good luck with that, Dr. Pines. Someone said to me once, how is that working for you? I said, obviously not well. Okay. What do we have to do? We have a big organization that does something, and now they have to plan, direct, organize, and control it. And somebody has to lead this show. And the idea is we provide customer service of some type. It could be a whatever, or a something you do. And eventually you'd like to make some revenue. Now, if you want to apply this to a not-for-profit, which is very easy to do, by the way, the idea of profit is ignored to some extent, and instead you look at how do you balance your revenues or your collections or what have you with your ability to deliver. See, even an outfit like Aggies Without Limits can use all this stuff. They are our local version of the Engineer Without Border model. And even they order stuff, have to get it delivered to the site, have to do the thing correctly, and so forth. So you can use this for just about anything. And the first thing we really do, as I said today, is talk about the idea of forecasting. What are we going to do? I guess we'll do this. Who will win the Super Bowl? One of the interesting theories I saw about the Super Bowl is the combination of teams who won and are playing in the Super Bowl was like the NFL's sort of nightmare collection, because the Falcons don't have a lot of national identity, and the New England Patriots have been suing the NFL. So, had you been predicting, they would have hoped for who to win? Of course, we're in southern New Mexico. It would have to be the men who wear the star, right? They didn't win. Get over it, I tell people. The game wasn't stolen from you by the referees. Okay, so I guess that it will rain today, it won't rain today. I have some evidence I've analyzed. Now, if you're really into this stuff and you've heard the term predictive analytics, we'll touch on that shortly. But there is a difference between prediction and forecasting. The authors say so. Read the chapter. Some rules about forecasts. They're almost always wrong. Further out, the likelihood of being right for 20 years from now, flip a coin. You can do it qualitative or quantitative. Typically, what we want to know is something like this. What should we be doing in the near term, medium term, and long term? What should we be doing? One example structure would be the next 90 days, next 1 to 3 years, further. If I have to build a building to do it, then we're probably in long-term forecasting, right? If you say go to work for Intel and you're debating where to erect the next fab facility, that's not exactly something you're going to do in 90 days. That's 3 to 5 years out. It's a lot of work. The Jet Hall renovation, which has been causing so much agita, why it caused agita is what? There aren't enough classrooms on campus, right? Because Jet Hall has a lot of classrooms. When they took it offline, they didn't suddenly erect another building and to have classes in, right? So you have the experience like Dr. Park and I walk into a room and we're waiting in the hallway and there's Dr. Bandini in the same room. And Dr. Park looked at me, I looked at him, I said, I'll go in. So I went in and the students noticed me and she didn't. So eventually she did and went, sort of asked for an explanation, and we said, we have the room now. And she said, no, you don't. And we said, another fantastic assignment algorithm. It didn't work. It put two classes in the same room. So fortunately, it was the first week of class, and she didn't get too upset. She just let the people go, and we had to go find another room. That kind of situation also gets covered by forecasting, oddly enough. But this could be one scenario where we forecast what we're doing for the next 90 days. And what you should think about is for the next 90 days, we're less flexible. 3 to 5 years out, we're pretty flexible, aren't we? We can be more flexible. Now, this can vary, the length of these periods. For example, if your job is building a new subway system in New York City, 20 years might not be enough for a long-term horizon from what I've seen. On the other hand, if we're running NMSU, the next 90 days for you guys, you're pretty locked in, right? I mean, yeah, there are things you can do to unlock yourself, like take a W or something, but pretty much we're locked, right? Less flexible. If you ask me right now what I'm going to be doing in 2019, I would bet against me teaching ie524. But I could be surprised, right? Every time I announce something like that, the IE faculty get annoyed. So you never know. So how would we do this at the big picture level? Do we have data? About 35 miles north of here is the New Mexico Spaceport America. They've been talking about that thing for I don't know how many years. 22 that I know of, and I'm sure since I've lived out here 22 years, they've been talking about it. And there was going to be commercial space travel. There any data on people for commercial space travel? Oddly enough, there is, because people have put down deposits. I guess if you have enough capital or you're really into it, write the check, right? Maybe take out an extra credit card. I don't know. There is some data, but not much. You can ask people about their attitudes for it, right? You got to have some data about that. Then we're going to look at past data. I try to identify some patterns in the data. And then extend our analysis. One of the big deals in the university business now is deploying predictive analytic forecasting, where we try to analyze data about you guys and predict patterns and things like that. I went to a talk on it yesterday and was pretty intrigued by the whole thing. So as the semester goes, I may hear more about this upcoming deployment of the product. So it'd be interesting as we go. But in any event, just so you think about it in some terms you understand. Imagine, if you will, I was going to forecast making a product. How many should I make? A week, a month, a year? What kinds of facilities do I need? These are things you might forecast. Example, if you would have told me that there would be a market for sweatshirts and various other products that said Aeropostale or pink on them, I might have said, okay, that's really interesting. If you are making such garments, what do you have to do? You have to get them made and get them in the store, right? To get them in the store means you've got to have shipping capacity, right? The stuff gets made in Asia mostly, has to come across the ocean, takes 14 days, 10 to 14 days to clear out of Vietnam and China and hit the U.S. port. Has to be in the store at this time. What good would the Christmas model be on January 15th? You can't do anything with it, right? So all of those things can be forecasted. But like I say, if you would have told me that people would wear things that say Aeropostale or Fitch, or I like to tease the occasional faculty member I know who went to Franklin and Marshall College, because there's an outfit overseas that makes products that they put Franklin Marshall on, and Franklin and Marshall College actually sued them for an IP violation and won. But there's all kinds of kids who couldn't find Lancaster, Pennsylvania on a map and are wearing Franklin Marshall shirts. If you would have told me that somebody wanted that, I would have laughed. And yet, people buy it, right? So one of the reasons I'm putting it that way is forecasting is not what you want or what you think is a great idea. It's what the organization wants to do. Will the pattern continue? In the chapter, they talk about qualitative forecasting. Use an expert, who is an expert? Any ordinary person 50 miles from home with a briefcase, right? Once in a while, someone assumes one of the faculty is an expert. They may be right, or they might not be. Experts are wrong regularly. We had a recent occurrence of that. There were a whole bunch of people who were pretty sure who would win the presidential election. It didn't work out their way. And again, we stay out of the ramifications of that in here, but fundamentally you had a bunch of experts saying one thing, and it didn't happen. And there was one guy who predicted the winner, who was denounced pretty regularly. He's predicted the correct winner, I don't know how many times. But he uses quantitative data to do it. He's not just guessing. You can do things like fit curves subjectively, Delphi method. You can read about that in the chapter. The reason I mentioned the spaceport is in the 1920s, the idea of commercial air travel came about. At first, that didn't work either. Well, of course, if you look at the planes, you might not be surprised, right? Some of those engines were not exactly reliable technologies. I famously tell people, I did a visit to Boeing in Renton, Washington, about 20 years ago now. And that was the plant that builds 737s, which are not really big jets, right? Somewhere on the shop floor there, they were restoring a B-17, which was a big aircraft by the standards of World War II, 1945, say, 43, 44. That thing looked almost scary to get into. It had stenciled on it crew weight 900 pounds, which is not 9 guys in a plane. I mean, you know, I don't know how many people fly in that plane, but I'm looking at that plane and I said, I wouldn't get in that. And yet at the time, people were more than happy to get into it, right? That was really flying. And I'm sure there was someone then saying, that seems like a foolish idea. So you can actually compare how technologies grow. And many people do have the theory with the spaceport that people will want to do space travel. Other people say, oh, come on, man. Tough call. We mostly in here talk about quantitative forecasting. We can use time alone, or we can try to do a causal forecast. Find some other variables. If we look at electronic components, we can do a nice job with reliability curves, because we know that mostly components fail over time. There are other things we can forecast based on time alone. We just do a time series. What would be really nice is if we could identify variables that have something to do with the process and the product we make. For example, when would we build more air conditioners so that they're available for when it gets hot? And if we're an international manufacturer, then they get to be available twice a year. Once for the northern hemisphere, once for the southern. How about that, huh? Okay. So time series analysis, where we start. Now, if you took quality control from me or Dr. Valles or anyone else, then you've seen control charts. Control charts are essentially a time series. And we have the ability, potentially, to predict the next point. So, chronological sequence, particular variable. What happens over time? Occasionally I do a little run chart of, for the people who are in the in-studio audience, I make handouts. And one of the things I try to do is predict how many people will be here on a given day. And you say, why would I do that? Well, it's easy. I have to pay for those things out of the department, right? So it's in my best interest to only make enough handouts for the number of people who would be here, right? Alternatively, I could oppress all of you and make you print this thing yourself. But that would require what? It to be available in enough time that you could print it out and then bring it to class, right? And sooner or later, some smart young person out there would say, hey, you know, why don't you go back to printing them? That would be more efficient, right? But in any event, I could do a time series on that, and in fact have started one. Because the first day they were all gone. The second day they weren't. Now we're on day 3, they're not all gone. And I can sort of adjust, right? And if you picture that, then what would occur to you is I would say, okay, well, it seems like on average I should make 12 handouts, right? Because on average 12 handouts got taken over the first 3 days. So for next Tuesday, I make 12. And what happens? 15 people show up, 3 people are annoyed. Well, why don't you make more? This is inconvenient of you, right? That's how you get variance from the forecast, right? Forecast error. What did I do? I used data that I collected over 3 data points, and I forecasted the next data point, and I was wrong. Now, at this level, this all seems very trivial again, right? But it's a nice illustration, isn't it? It includes customer annoyance. Now, on the other hand, next Tuesday, there's something better to do. For example, like, I don't know, somebody sponsors lunch for all students on campus at 11:15. The chance that all of you would show up is reduced somewhat, right? So I would discover another type of variation, correct? That would be a random occurrence. Alternatively, we could look for the following. To make it a little more complex, see where the equations are going to come from. In a time series, we can have trends over time. We can have cycles in data, seasonal variation. Seasonal variation is easy to explain, right? Christmas trees are bought right around Christmas time. You don't sell a lot of them in July. It's just the way it works. If you buy clothing, you might astonish some of you to discover right now is a clothing season called resort. Yeah. What resort is like sort of summer-oriented stuff for people from the north who are going to the south for a vacation break. Snowbird type people, if you will. More people with more money than college students, right? You're not thinking, geez, I need some resort wear, right? But it really exists. It's seasonal. And then there are irregular fluctuations, which we would know as noise. Noisy data points. Things happen. What could this all mean to us? If I'm going to forecast people wanting a product or service, I got to think about what are the trends. I'll give you an example. It's a little odd. The concept of, for example, when I was a college student, the only people who shaved their head were not in college. They may have been in college at, I don't know, the Citadel or West Point or something, some military place, but you didn't see anyone shaving their head. In fact, even guys who played sports, who now you might see shaved heads, basketball for example, had long hair. Over time, that's changed. That's a trend. A cycle in things is when something comes back. Every so often, something comes back. Seasonal, we know. So let's look at page 61 in ye old textbook. Looks like this. There's some trends. This is our friend, the control chart, we hope, right? Purely random, in control. This isn't in control, but purely random. What good is your forecast there? Might as well forecast what? The mean. Project the mean out. Boom. If your data are purely random, why would you do anything other than the mean? You'd have to convince yourself there's something else going on. The increasing linear trend, of course, you've been studying since 4th grade, right? Or earlier, for all I know. If you like, you can have all kinds of other fancy trends, curvilinear, exponential, all kinds of things. If you wanted to forecast something with this type of model, you'd have to convince yourself that model is useful, though, right? This is an example of a seasonal pattern with a trend in it. See how the average is going up and the thing keeps doing roughly the same. These are things just to show you what a forecast might look like. So, for example, my next data point that I'd forecast might be over here somewhere, right? If somebody said it's over here, what should you do? Suddenly we have, tell me why. For example, let me draw that. It looks roughly like that, right? If the next data point predicted by someone is here, tell me why. Did a government policy change, for example, trade policy change? Did we just declare this product obsolete? Could we have done that? Sure. These are like residual spares. Or let's finish what's around. We'll only need this many, right? It isn't necessarily wrong. Now, in problems in the book, it's almost always wrong, but in real life, it could very well be somebody made a decision externally that says something different is going to happen. But fundamentally, if we take a linear plus seasonal, and these are, and what we're going to start to look at is the idea that now we have actuals as well, and we're interested in the error of the forecast. How good was it? Now, some basic ideas. Page 58, 59, 60. We usually say y hat. Depending on how many variables you got in your forecast, it's some function of a bunch of independent variables plus an error term. That should look familiar to most IE students, this one. What we are interested in now is it's a function of time. It's a function of seasonality, potentially, cycles, and so forth. The demand for snow shovels is seasonal, right? I was in Target back in November, and my wife and I are wandering through Target, I think it was, and she discovered that Target had some lime green snow shovels. Really snappy looking. She says, why don't we get one? Because we don't have one. And the one time it snowed, we had the little portable shovel, and that wasn't very convenient for you. And you'll like the color. You know, it was like that neon lime green. So I said, okay. And of course, it's like I don't know, 75, 80 degrees out. And there I am in my polo and shorts and Birkenstocks carrying snow shovel through Target. And I get online and a woman says, "Oh, what a great idea." I said, "Well, the color is attractive, right? I haven't gotten to use it yet, which maybe I do control the weather, right? I bought a snow shovel, it doesn't snow, right? It's like when you wash your car, right? You wash your car and then it rains. That's qualitative forecasting, and the answer to that is unlikely in the desert. Although lately it's been a little different, hasn't it? Okay, more seriously though, snow shovels, the sales of those would be seasonal, correct? You can't really sell a lot of them in July. And what does that tell us, by the way? If I run a factory that makes snow shovels, I have a problem, don't I? The problem is I have a factory that makes a product only part of the year. I only need workers part of the year. Therefore, I have to, big MBA term, diversify, right? Okay. But fundamentally, if the idea of trend and seasonality and all sounds really weird, read page 59. You'll get the idea. But as you think about this stuff, the reason we're interested in this is we have lots of questions to answer for our business. How many do we make? When do we make them? Where do we make them? Where do we sell them? To who? Right? The classic example I use has to do with education. It went something like this. One of our alums works for a company somewhere. I hear from him randomly. He's been gone like 20 years, and every so often he pops into my email with another suggestion. And a while back, he did one of these Six Sigma Black Belt courses at Wisconsin, and it costs like $6,000. Okay? So, yeah, they get expensive, those classes. So anyway, he calls me up and he tells me, you know, you could teach that and you make a lot of money. And I said, really? And he says, yeah, I went to Wisconsin, it cost $6,000 and you guys could do it and they're printing money, so to speak. And I said, I don't think they're printing money with that. I said, I think they're actually probably closer to breaking even, potentially. And he said, why? And I said, well, first of all, if I do this, how many customers, who wants this thing? What do they want? What am I providing them, right? If I did this, I would need what here to do it with? Every January, the CE department who's in this building has their concrete school, and they have their bridge inspection school. And they have a clientele for that. You get into the Six Sigma teaching business, there's all kinds of people competing in that. I said, I couldn't forecast cash flow and get enough risk capital to actually get anyone interested in doing this. They looked at me, it sounded like it was disbelief. But fundamentally, when I think about things, the first thing I think about is who are the customers and where are they and what do they want? And would they be willing to buy the product from me? And then I think in terms of if I were to provide this product, what would I need in terms of people, facilities, web support? Everything has to have a website now, right? I'd have to hire faculty to teach it because you've got to have one of the black belts to teach the class, even though there's nothing they teach that isn't in a standard IE department or statistics department. And I said, the cash flow forecast doesn't work. That's why we're not doing it. I said, so fundamentally, this is going on every day of the week, everywhere you could imagine this stuff. Some of it's real sophisticated, like we're going to talk about next time. Some of it's very basic, like I believe this. But these are some questions every manufacturing and service firm has to answer. What are they providing? When? Where? To whom? How? Right? Turns out recently I read that the predicted growth in industrial engineers over the next 20 years or so is pretty minimal. It also turns out that the growth in OR analysts is 30%, as predicted by the U.S. Department of Labor. So I pointed that out to people. I said, look, what do we teach here? Operations research, right? Linear programming, dynamic programming, integer programming, all that jazz. I said, obviously we made the correct decision to orient towards that stuff. See, I looked at that and I said, hey, I'm not an OR guy, but fantastic. Because once in a while somebody said, we need to expand in a different area. And I said, yeah, it's funny. The growth in systems engineering and operations research is really high. The growth in people to do traditional industrial engineering is not so high. The growth in supply chain people will be this, and so forth. Again, reacting to a forecast. And the reason I'm kind of belaboring it like this is sometimes the sophistication of the modeling can cause you to lose track of what you're doing. Because I saw, for example, yesterday when they were talking about predictive analytics, things I said, I'm not worried about people offering enough sections of something. I'm worried about enough of some other thing. And yet, the sophisticated model said something else. Forecasts are almost always wrong. We're going to think about error and not the who do we pin this on type. We're a positive and uplifting group here. We don't scapegoat forecasters, but we are interested in error. We'll talk about that in our next episode. We're interested in variance, essentially. If I make a forecast and I'm wrong, why was I wrong? Helps me improve the forecast for the next time. And with that, I'll see you on Tuesday. Have a good day.